Welcome to Shuffle Source. I'm your host Brandon, and today we are back with another Commander Precon upgrade video. This time we will be upgrading the Counter Intelligence Precon deck from Edge of Eternities. Let's get into it. Really fast, before discussing the commander that we will be using, let's quickly go over the Precon upgrade format that we use here at Shuffle Source. So we will either be using the primary or the backup commander. Next, we have a cap of around $100 or less that we use when choosing the upgrades for this deck. We will be adding 10 cards and we will be removing 10 cards. Additionally, we had a few more upgrades that we like to call no budget options near the end of the video, and that's either for people who already have the cards or maybe have a little bit extra in their budget for continued upgrades. And lastly, we do use market value pricing provided by TCG Player at the time of recording, which will be displayed at the bottom of the screen as we discuss the cards. So the commander that we will be going with today is Inspirit Flagship Vessel. For a blue, a red, and a white, we have a legendary artifact spacecraft that has station. Tap another creature you control, put charge counters equal to its power on this spacecraft. Station only as a sorcery, it's an artifact creature at 8+. At 1+ charge counter, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put your choice of a +1/+1 counter or 2 charge counters on up to one other target artifact. And then at 8+, it becomes a artifact creature that has flying and has the static ability. Other artifacts you control have hexproof and indestructible. So the best way to describe this commander is sort of like a rolling ball, in that it may start small, but as the turns continue to go down and it continues to put +1/+1 counters or charge counters on artifacts, the ball starts to build so much momentum that it ends up hitting this point where you have a board that's just so overwhelming that your opponents really don't have much of an answer, especially when you have this big board of powerful utility artifacts or powerful artifact creatures, and then they all become hexproof and indestructible, essentially putting your board sort of like in like a lockdown stasis mode, to where even if they try to board wipe or anything, they would have to first get rid of Inspirit first and then attack your board. So it does start off a little bit like a slow burn, but it does hit a point in the game where the momentum is just so overwhelming that if your opponents don't recognize the threat early on, they're just going to get to a point where they can't answer you. So with this deck, you're really going to want to try to get Inspirit online as soon as you can. You do want to start really being able to pass out those +1/+1 counters or those charge counters across either your utility artifacts or your artifact creatures, because you do have a lot of proliferate in this deck, and you do want to leverage that proliferate to really amplify the amount of counters. Honestly, the deck comes out of the box with a lot of good cards. All we're really going to do is just fine tune a bit of what it is either lacking or just better versions of what it's already trying to do in leveraging the artifact package. So the way we're going to upgrade this deck is by putting in very powerful and synergistic artifacts. We're going to add a little bit more protection. And lastly, we're going to be adding some cards that will help us close out the game. So here we have the first of our additions. We have All Will Be One. For 3 colorless and 2 red, we have an enchantment that reads, whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. So really, as we stated before, this deck is really all about counters. It even says that in the name, Counter Intelligence. So as we talked about before, this deck does have a lot of ways to put counters on permanents you control, whether that's charge counters or +1/+1 counters. And then additionally, it also has a lot of ways to proliferate to increase the number of counters as you put them out on the board. Because of this deck leaning very well into counter production, All Will Be One becomes basically a machine gun for your opponents or any of the key creatures that they have. Additionally, the later the game goes on and the more counters you're able to proliferate or get on the board, this can really turn into a win condition for you quickly. And so it's also important to note that it says whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent. There are cards in this deck, such as Resourceful Defense, for example, where you can actually move counters from one permanent to another, and that will still trigger All Will Be One. So here we have our next addition, Counterspell, for 2 blue. It is an instant that says counter target spell. Just having that counterspell in your back pocket is really useful to either stop someone else from a win condition, or it would be useful to counter something like a Farewell, which is really the scariest type of board wipe that you can have against our sort of deck, because our indestructible that we're giving our board from our commander really won't matter. Pretty much regardless in any deck that I'm building, if I'm playing blue, I find a way to fit in a counterspell. Here we have our next addition, Filigree Vector, for 3 colorless and 1 white. We have a 1/1 artifact creature Phyrexian construct that says, when Filigree Vector enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each of any number of target creatures and a charge counter on each of any number of target artifacts. You can also pay 1, tap this, sacrifice another artifact to proliferate. So there's a lot to love about this card. It does a lot of what we're already trying to do with our commander, and that we want to put +1/+1 counters on our creatures, and we want to be able to put charge counters on a lot of our utility artifacts. Additionally, this card also does give us access to even more proliferate through its activated ability, which will really help us stack up those counters over time. Here's our next addition. We have Flux Channeler for 2 colorless and a blue. We have a 2/2 creature human wizard that says, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. So the first thing is 3 mana is really not that much of an investment considering the amount of value from proliferation that this card can give you. Additionally, that proliferation that it gives you is also passive. It will trigger every time you cast a non-creature spell. And this deck does have a lot of non-creature spells in it, a lot of them being artifacts. This can be very useful into helping you station Inspirit faster. Our utility artifacts, such as Insight Engine, also really love proliferate, and again, helping us get the +1/+1 counters on our creatures that can really help us just get the damage through to our opponents. Here we have our next addition. We have Illustrious Wanderglyph for 4 colors and a white. We have a 2/2 artifact creature golem that has Ascend. If you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. Other artifacts you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature token. So the first thing to call out here is it is very easy to get the City's Blessing as it counts any permanent, so that would also include your lands. So it's pretty much a given that if this stays on the battlefield and you can hit that Ascend ability, you will have the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. Now, we will have a lot of artifact creatures in this deck, including our commander when fully stationed, and giving it a static +2/+2 is a big deal. Additionally, this card also creates artifact creatures, which will also take advantage of the +2/+2 anthem that it provides. Keep in mind, this is not only on just your upkeep, this happens at the beginning of each upkeep. So you will quickly be building out a lot of colorless gnome artifacts if this stays in play very long. Those gnome artifacts are very useful, not only for attacking because they'll likely be 3/3s, but you can use those gnomes to help build up your artifact count, as we do have several cards in this deck that really care about the number of artifacts we have. Additionally, those gnomes are also great to sacrifice with Filigree Vector to use this proliferate ability. The next addition we have is Inventor's Fair, which is a legendary land that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life. You can also tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay for, tap it, sacrifice Inventor's Fair, search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Activate this ability only if you control 3 or more artifacts. First thing to call out is that if you do get this card early, you will be likely getting that 1 life every turn, considering the amount of artifacts that we will have on the board. But that's really not the main reason this card is here. We really want this for that tutoring ability that it has. This can help us look for a win condition. This can help us answer some other problems on the board. Just being able to use this for us to find any of our key artifacts at a given time to solve any problem is priceless. The flexibility that tutors give you are excellent, and the opportunity cost of just having this go in as a land slot is very small. And here we have the next of our additions. We have Magistrate's Scepter for 3 colorless. It is an artifact where you can pay for, tap it, put a charge counter on Magistrate's Scepter, or you can tap it to remove 3 charge counters from Magistrate's Scepter. Take an extra turn after this one. So Magistrate's Scepter is really a powerhouse in this deck. So first of all, getting charge counters on this is very easy. It can put it on it itself, or you can use Inspirit or any other number of cards in this deck to get that charge counter on it first. Then you can also proliferate easily to get this charge counter up, and you can end up taking quite a bit of extra turns with this. In fact, this card is so good at giving you extra turns that you can actually go infinite with this with your commander and any one source of proliferate. So the way this works is you will have Magistrate's Scepter on the board. As long as you have Inspirit on the board, when you move to the combat phase, you're going to choose to use Inspirit's ability to put the 2 charge counters on Magistrate's Scepter. And then all you need is one sort of source of reliable proliferate, and you will easily get this up to 3 charge counters every turn, which you can then do over and over and over again until you win the game. And here we have our next addition, Tezzeret the Seeker. For 3 colorless and 2 blue, we have a Planeswalker Tezzeret that has a starting loyalty of 4. First ability for +1 loyalty, untap up to 2 target artifacts. -X loyalty, search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost X or less and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Then its last ability, you can pay 5 loyalty, and artifacts you control become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 until end of turn. As you can see, this is a pretty versatile planeswalker for this deck. Being able to untap artifacts is very useful because we can use it to untap our mana rocks or any other sort of key artifacts that we would really like to use more than once. This is also another way for you to be able to tutor up artifacts that you may need in the game. And then let's not forget, it does have an artifact buff where until end of turn we can turn all of our utility artifacts into 5/5 creatures, which will all likely be hexproof and indestructible because of Inspirit being on the board and fully powered up. And here we have our next addition, Unwinding Clock. For 4 colorless, we have an artifact that says untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. So similar to what we were discussing before with Tezzeret the Seeker, being able to untap our artifacts after we use them is a massive advantage. As you can imagine, this card synergizes very well with the heavy amount of artifacts that we have in this deck. Whether it is mana rocks, any other sort of utility artifacts, or even our artifact creatures, for example, just being able to untap them is massive. And here we have the last of our additions. We have Walking Ballista. For XX, we have a 0/0 artifact creature construct. Walking Ballista enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. You can also pay 4, put a +1/+1 counter on Walking Ballista. You can also remove a +1/+1 counter from Walking Ballista. It deals 1 damage to any target. So Walking Ballista is really good here in that it can convert excess +1/+1 counters into direct damage, whether that's to our opponent's faces or to any sort of key creatures or planeswalkers that they might have. Because of how rapidly we're going to get +1/+1 counters on Walking Ballista, especially when we're proliferating often, it's just going to turn into yet another machine gun for you on the board to handle whatever threats comes your way. And we now made it to the removals portion of the video, and we are kicking things off with Empowered Auto Generator. For 4 colorless, we have an artifact that says this artifact enters tapped. You can also tap it, put a charge counter on this artifact. Add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of charge counters on this artifact. So the reason I want to cut this card is I just find it to be very slow. First of all, you have to pay 4 mana to get it on the battlefield, and then when it finally enters the battlefield, it will enter tapped. So that means you would have to wait until your next turn potentially, or unless you had another way to untap it, before you could really take advantage of it. Then the first time you can take advantage of it, you're only going to put a single charge counter on it. Now, obviously, I know with the proliferate and stuff, we can really get this ball rolling. But honestly, think about all the investment that you're now doing to get this to be good. You're having to spend 4 mana. You're having to potentially wait an entire turn cycle. You're then going to have to tap it. You're then going to try to get all the proliferate on it. Or you may try to intentionally put charge counters on it with our commander, for example. That's just a lot of hoops to get this mana rock to really do anything for you. There's just better ramp options available, and I don't think we're going to miss this card. Here's our next removal, Etched Oracle. For 4 colorless, we have a 0/0 artifact creature wizard that has Sunburst. This creature enters with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. You can also pay 1, remove 4 +1/+1 counters from this creature. Target player draws 3 cards. So I think this card is very similar to the previous card we discussed in that I just think it's quite slow for you to really get to the benefit of the card. First of all, you have to pay 4 mana to get this creature on the board. In the best case scenario, you're paying 3 different types of mana in order for it to come in with the counters on it. Then you have to find another way to get the counters on it, more than likely our commander or through proliferating, and you want to make sure that it gets to the point where it at least has 5 counters on it, so that when you use its remove counters ability, it will still stick around and not immediately die. Again, I just think we have more reliable pieces of card draw in this deck, and you'll just get a lot more value from other cards. And for our next cut, we have Gavel of the Righteous. For 2 colorless, we have an artifact equipment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a charge counter on this equipment. Equipped creatures get +1/+1 for each counter on this equipment. As long as the equipment has 4 or more counters on it, equipped creature has double strike. It also has equip pay 3, or remove a counter from this equipment. So I do think this card has a little bit of a narrow impact in that it's really only going to benefit obviously the creature that it's equipped to, whereas you'll notice a lot of the themes with this deck is sort of trying to do board wide synergy, getting things collectively bigger or protecting things across the board, and that's going to be a way more reliable and stronger strategy for you with this particular deck. Yes, this does have the potential to make one creature really big and have that double strike, but you're really going to have to invest either amount of turns or a lot of your Inspirit combat triggers to put charge counters on it, or to really just make sure your proliferate engine is really moving in order to get the benefit out of this card. I just honestly think any of the other additions that we're adding will just provide more reliable value for you. And next on the chopping block, we have Golem Foundry for 3 colorless. We have an artifact that says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may put a charge counter on this artifact. Remove 3 charge counters from this artifact, create a 3/3 colorless Golem artifact creature token. Yes, you will cast quite a bit of artifacts in this deck, and you do have a lot of ways to proliferate, so getting charge counters on this artifact isn't the hardest thing to do. However, the payoff for the 3 charge counters is really not that big. I mean, 3/3 colorless Golem token, cool, but it's costing you 3 charge counters to get even a single token. It's decent, but it's just really not that impactful. In my opinion, the investment of mana and resources and time for this card is not worth getting the golems. So here we have our next cut, Lonely Sandbar, which is a land that says this land enters tapped. You can also tap it for a blue, and it also has cycling cost for 1 blue, where you can discard this card and draw a card. So the first thing to call out is this deck comes with 40 lands. Now, this really isn't a landfall deck, or really a deck that requires that many lands. So honestly, this was a pretty easy cut. As far as why I chose this land over any other land, for example, is that this one will always enter the battlefield tapped, which I don't love. It only generates a single color of mana. And yes, while cycling can be useful from time to time, this is just really not necessary. And here we have our next removal, Secluded Steppe, which is a land that says this land enters tapped. You can add a white, or you can cycle it for a white. This is just like Lonely Sandbar, what we discussed before. Again, we're going to cut another land. It always comes in tapped. It only taps for white mana. Again, the cycling ability is very situational, and we do have a surplus of lands in this deck to start with. And here we have our next removal, Soul Guide Lantern for 1 colorless. We have an artifact that says when this artifact enters, exile target card from a graveyard. You can also tap it, sacrifice this artifact, exile each opponent's graveyard. You can also pay 1, sack it, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. So this card does offer a few things for you. It does provide you a little bit of graveyard hate, or you can use it to draw a card. However, this is really sort of an opportunity cost card, meaning all of the additions that we're adding just outclass this card in every way, shape, and form. There's no reason you would choose this card over any of the other cards that we're looking to add. It is only one-time use for its other abilities. You have to sacrifice it when you use it. It doesn't have anything to do with our strategy involving counters, counter manipulation, or proliferating, or anything like that. So it's just not overall a synergistic card for the deck. Graveyard hate can be useful, but this is just really not necessary. Here we have our next removal, Temple of Triumph, which is a land. This land enters tapped. When this land enters scry 1, you can also tap it for either a red or white. So I know what you're thinking, removing another land? Yes, because it started with 40. We're removing 3 lands and we're adding 1. As you remember, we did add Inventor's Fair in the additions, which will bring us up to a total of 38 lands, which is more than enough lands for this deck. As I've mentioned in a lot of other videos, I am personally not a fan of any of the temple lands. I don't like that they always come in tapped, and scrying is really not the biggest deal. You only get it once, and it's only a scry 1. Now, being able to tap for 2 colors is nice, but there are just way better lands out there that can tap for multiple colors. And here we have our next removal, Titan Forge for 3 colorless. It is an artifact where you can pay 3, tap it, put a charge counter on this artifact, or you can tap it, remove 3 charge counters from this artifact, create a 9/9 colorless Golem artifact creature token. So really this card to me just seems slow before you can really reliably get a 9/9 colorless Golem onto the battlefield. Now don't get me wrong, when you do get your colorless Golem, you'll obviously be happy that you have a 9/9 on the board, but you're going to usually be at a part of the game by the time you get that first token. Your opponents will likely have something on the board like a 1/1 or something that will just easily chump block this 9/9. Meaning the 9/9 is really not that impactful. It doesn't have really any other keywords on it. It doesn't have flying, trample, or anything like that. You also do have to tap this in order to use either of the abilities. So whether you're putting the counter on it or removing the counters to create the golem, you do have to tap this artifact to be able to do that. And here we have the last of our removals. We have Universal Surveillance for X and 3 blue. We have a sorcery that has Improvise. Your artifacts can help cast this spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 colorless. Draw X cards. So this deck actually comes with 2 different X cost spells that are both focused on drawing cards. The other one that comes in the deck is Pull from Tomorrow. But why I like Pull from Tomorrow better is that it actually costs 1 less blue pip and it can be cast at instant speed. I just don't think the deck really needs 2 X cost draw spells, so this is the one I would cut over Pull from Tomorrow. And here we've made it to the no budget options portion of the video, and we are going to kick things off with Esper Sentinel, aka Ristic Buddy, for 1 white. We have a 1/1 artifact creature human soldier that says whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. So Esper Sentinel is an amazing card. It's honestly one of those cards where if you're just playing white and you have one, and that's regardless of you having any synergies or anything else to make Esper Sentinel better. But in this case, this deck is amazing with Esper Sentinel. It is an artifact. We're going to be able to put a lot of +1/+1 counters on it. Our commander, when it's fully stationed, will give it hexproof and indestructible. It can really make this a super reliable source of card draw for you, and it can really be taxing on your opponents. And here we have our next no budget option. We have Tesseret, Cruel Captain. For 3 colorless, we have a legendary planeswalker, Tesseret, that has a starting loyalty of 4. Whenever an artifact you control enters, put a loyalty counter on Tesseret. For 0 loyalty, untap target artifact or creature. If it's an artifact creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. For -3 loyalty, search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And then for -7 loyalty, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put 3 +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it's not a creature, it becomes a 0/0 robot artifact creature. So Tesseret Cruel Captain is a really cool new planeswalker that came out of Edge of Eternities, and he is truly all about artifacts, which is what this deck is all about. So the first thing to call out here is that his loyalty will grow whenever an artifact you control enters. We are going to be able to put quite a bit of artifacts on the board, so being able to increase his loyalty will be pretty easy. Additionally, you can also increase loyalty counters with proliferating, so he can get very big very quickly. That first ability gives us yet another way to untap key artifacts in our deck, such as very strong utility artifacts, or mana rocks again, or creatures with great tap abilities. And if it's a creature, that additional +1/+1 counter is very nice. His second ability is also going to be used quite often in that it is a cheap artifact tutor. This is a great way to get our Soul Ring, for example, or if you did also happen to put Esper Sentinel in your deck, this is a great way to get out your Esper Sentinel. There's honestly quite a bit of great options to get with this card. And here we have the last of our no budget options. We have the Ozolith for 1 colorless. We have a legendary artifact. Whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if the Ozolith has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. So the Ozolith is just an amazing card in this deck. First of all, we're going to be able to preserve our counters. We're going to save and store all of the counters from creatures that we have that leave the battlefield. And it doesn't matter which type of counters those are, whether it's +1/+1 or charge counters. This deck also has the ability to end up getting quite a bit of +1/+1 counters on the board, especially after we proliferate a lot of them. So if we do happen to hit a board wipe or something, and all of these counters end up on the Ozolith, if we just simply get our commander out, or maybe another evasive creature, we can have a serious, in some cases lethal threat if we move all of the counters that were put onto the Ozolith onto one of those creatures. And there you have it. After upgrading this deck, we have a final upgrade cost of $97.56. This total does not include the no budget options that we covered. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos. So I would really like to hear what you think about the Counterintelligence Precon deck. Which way did you end up going with it? Did you go with Inspirit, or did you decide to go with Kilo? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to see the counterintelligence deck in action, you can check out the video link here and watch me and 3 of my friends have an epic space-themed battle using the Edge of Eternity Precon decks. Until next time, thank you for watching.